Welcome. My name is Jeremy Novy. You're joining me today in conjunction with the Ogden Museum at my art studio in California. We're going to be doing a stencil workshop. I hope that you all have had time to gather the items needed to make this project, as well as printed out the actual stencil we're going to do. If you haven't, you may have a little bit of time right now to quickly go and have print this out. But we are going to need this as to create the stencil for this project. You're also going to need some spray mount or some glue stick. Either can work, whatever you have. You're going to need some blue painter's tape or masking tape. Tape that actually doesn't have a plastic coating on it. It is what you really need. You're going to need an Xacto, a marker, some whiteout, or a marker. If you don't happen to have whiteout, that's cool. I'm going to show you a technique using the marker. That's very, very similar. You're also going to need some. You're going to need a cereal box that's flattened out, or a file folder, or a manila folder works as well. These are things you can find around your house, or you can actually use cardstock paper. You can buy this at Staples or other places as well. But I'm trying to show you a very cheap and inexpensive way of doing this at home. You're also going to need a cardboard box that's corrugated, a little thickness, or a cutting mat. Either of these can be used to cut your stencil out, not to damage the table that you're cutting on, the surface. You're also going to need some spray paint, So what makes a stencil very successful is when you can subvert a contemporary conversation into a pre-existing image. So here I'm going to give you examples. So here we have an image of the Cultural Revolutionist conjoined with Cher to make a contemporary conversation about something going on. To a lot of people, Cher may be a very strong woman figure, and she's done a lot of great things for the world. And those means she definitely is a cultural revolutionist. But we've now joined two images to make a contemporary conversation. Another example of this would be Paddington Bear. We always see Paddington Bear with his suitcase. He's traveling, he's going places. But as soon as we've added migration as a crime, all of a sudden we now have been given a contemporary conversation about a children's book. And with today's recent things with DACA and the Dreamers program and allowing for people to stay within the United States, I think this is a very important image to be doing. Another image that I created, as you can see, is the segregation water fountains. Normally the water fountain would say whites and colors, but I've actually changed it so it says straights and gays. I'm actually trying to have a conversation about the lack of queer knowledge or queer history in high schools and our education system not really giving the proper rights as human beings to transgendered students as well as gays. So I've created this to make a contemporary conversation. It's an older pre-existing image. I've conjoined two different things to create a contemporary story. And that's what makes a stencil really successful, is when you're able to join two different images to create a larger conversation, a larger statement at that. So what I'm going to have you do is I'm going to have you take this image. And so as you can see, there are some letters, and if you can see, there's islands. So the letter O, the letter R, and the letter A all have islands. So islands are bad. You don't want islands. We're going to need to create bridges to these islands, creating a peninsula. Peninsulas are good. An example of a peninsula is the letter N. That spike that goes there is kind of like a peninsula. Or here, I'll take the white out and make your O have a bridge. You can also create a bridge using the marker. You just have to slightly draw beyond the points of the end of the O. This allows for you to visually see an area not to cut. That's if you don't have whiteout. I'm going to have you do the same thing for the letter A and the letter R. So you should have something that looks like this, creating bridges and peninsula's between the A, the spot in the middle of the A, spot in the middle of the O, and the spot in the middle of the R. So once we've done that, we're going to actually need to mount it to a cardstock, the cereal box, manila folder, or one of those items. And in order to do that, you can use either glue stick, and then just cover it over the areas where you can see the letters are. It's not necessary that you actually end up with glue stick in this area. So when you put it, you can kind of see where the letters are, and just put it in those areas. And that's how you would use the glue stick. But if you have spray mount, you can use spray mount. And again, just kind of like spray in the areas that you see, the areas that you see the letters. And then take that and mount that to the paper or manila folder. We'll put it on the manila folder to show you this. So once you put it down, you're going to want to try to give yourself a bit of a border. You want like an inch border kind of around the whole entire thing. This will allow for you to not create such a mess when spraying it. It's actually called overspray when you have a spray that goes around the edge. So once you have it like mounted down onto your envelope, I'm gonna have you like cut out. First, you have to like make sure it dries. It's important that the spray mount dries. If it doesn't dry, when you take the Xacto across the paper, it'll bunch up and gather in a way that it's going to ruin your image later on. So make sure it's dry, shake it. I know that like some glue sticks actually change colors. They change white from purple to white to let you know that it's dry. So once we have it all dry, we're going to start with our letter N. And so we're going to start at the very top of like the N arch, and we're going to cut this one little section. And you're going to want to make sure that you're cutting vertically. It's important that you, or horizontally. You don't want to do vertically. If you do vertically, it's like pulling it towards you, and you don't want to do that. So you want to do it horizontally. So you are going to have to turn your paper a little bit. And so we're going to turn it to do the other line that goes down, keeping it horizontal. Again, you're going to want to turn it to go up the other part of the N, keeping it horizontal. It just makes it easier going this way. Vertical is a little hard. You know, you're moving your arm in a different way, and you're pulling a knife towards yourself, which isn't good. So just continue on doing all of the areas around the letter N. You may have to turn it to the right, then turn it to the left, turning it in a different direction every time, but make sure that you cut vertically. You can, if you're not sure what areas you have cut and you haven't, you can flip it over. There will be like some areas that can show you where you have cut and haven't cut to make sure that you get all of the areas, all the lines. Make sure that you get the edges really well. You don't want to tear at the edge and ruin your stencil. You really want it to like pop out very easily, the same way that like a perforated line would pop out. Really try to hold down the other sections of the paper if you're having a little bit of time. Not the stencil, but the actual, not the section you're removing, but the actual stencil itself, holding it down. So you don't have any of these sections kind of moving back and forth. That would be bad. So you really want it to be still flat. And when you're removing the letter, just like hold down the stencil in a way as you're pulling it out, allows for that to be. So you're going to want to save in all of your pieces. If by accident you have cut the line wrong, you can actually take this letter, put it back into the stencil, and then tape it from the back. This allows for you to recut the stencil. We don't have an eraser, so all we have is these pieces to actually put right back where they were, tape it from the back, and then recut it. Sometimes it's really important to practice your letters. The letter L can be a B, a J, or a number of other things if you slightly cut it wrong. So it's really important to practice your letters and make sure that you do them well. So I'm going to have you move on to like the letter A, since we have bridges and there for that. And we're just going to like cut the one section of the A that goes down here. Then we're going to create another section that will kind of have these other areas. So just cut along the line, turning it. And then taking the piece out. Again, holding down the paper itself so that you don't bend it and make it go in different directions. You really want it to be stable and together. And so one thing that makes a stencil really strong is by distancing it. Like we have to social distance ourselves right now. And that helps us stay strong, and that's what this message is about NOLA being strong. It definitely is a city that's resilient and has been through a lot, and together is very strong. And so stencils stay strong by socially distancing the lines in a way, about every 6 inches, very similar to us having to do 6 feet in our life. And so that's what this stencil that we're doing here, and I'm hoping that I can somehow make you see that being socially distanced is good. And there we have it, the letter A. And as you can see, it's all staying together. It's not like, moving in any different directions. You really want it to be flat like this as you cut out the whole thing. So I'm going to have you cut all of the letters out. Again, being sure to keep the O, the R, and the A, the holes to be there. So we're going to move along here. Hopefully you've had a little bit of time to cut the letters. If for some reason you fall a little bit behind, you can rewatch this video a few times and be able to figure it out. So after we've cut all of the letters out, we now have the O, which I've added a fleur-de-lis. It's not subverted the same way that some of these political images are, but it is a simple way of subverting an image. So we have the O, which is normally just like a letter. It can represent a lot of things. And we're now trying to make it represent New Orleans. So we've put an image of New Orleans in there, the fleur-de-lis. And so it's slightly subverted in a way to tell a story between images in a different way. So in order for this to not fall apart, we're going to just cut out the fleur-de-lis, and we'll worry about the circle later. It's actually gray to kind of help you visually see it. But what's important is to keep it strong, we have to separate it a little bit. And so we're going to separate the band that's in the middle from the rest of it. So I'm going to have you take a marker or the whiteout, and I'm going to do it both ways. So if you can see on the bottom, I did the whiteout. Up above, I used like the marker technique, which is just kind of like that line. And so we're going to cut out the middle band, separating it from the rest of it. So there we have the band is out. And then spacing away like we had to with the O and the R, we're going to like cut the bottom legs and then the top kind of arms separate from that band. Again, turning the paper so that it can help you easily cut it. There are going to be some circles. Instead of picking up your Xacto to do the edges, just actually turn the paper and as you're cutting it, and it allows you to have a better curved line, more even than like kind of like a stop sign. And then take that piece out. And as you can see, we've done one of the things. So I'm going to have you actually cut all of them. I'm going to cut along with you. And we're going to keep the gray area of the circle there. I hope that you've all had a little bit of time to go check out some art while you've been So I hope you have a little bit of time to go and check out some art and take a bit of a walk outside in the air and get some air and sun. There's been a couple different things going on at the Ogden. One is a scavenger hunt that involves my art. You can find a couple different places where my art is throughout New Orleans. And one of my favorite places is the Children's Museum pavilion that I painted 3 years ago. So in New Orleans, the new Children's Pavilion, which is in City Park, you can find right behind the New Orleans Museum. There is a shelter there, and this shelter was made to be storybook shelter. There's a ton of different stencils in there of different animals. There's like a raccoon, there's some crows, there's some pelicans. There's a number of different stencils. And you can go check this out, see different ways that I've created different stencils, different lines, different techniques, and enjoy this new addition to the Children's Museum. You know, there is a book out, Stencil Nation, that has a very nice collection of artwork. But what is also amazing about this is that they actually have an archive online. So stencilarchive.org you can go to and you can Google tree. And so maybe you want to make a stencil of a tree, but you can't figure out how the leaves connect to the branches. There you can go and you can find a lot of different information or different images of how to cut a tree. And don't copy that, but take a little bit of information from here and a little information from there and really create your own stencil. But it becomes a very good, useful tool for that. And so, yeah, I would check that out. Be sure to take your time, really try to like follow the line as best as possible. If you do make a mistake, again, save all of your pieces. You can put it back in there, tape it from the back, start all over. And so when you're done, you should have something that looks like this. It's really an easy way to tell where your lines are and stuff to actually turn it over. If you view it from the front, you may actually see some of the printer's ink areas, the marker that I use and other things. So you really want to kind of turn it over and make sure that the lines are proper and in that way. And so once we have that, and you've now visually seen how you separate the middle band, how you separate the O and whatnot, we're going to move on to another step that might be a little bit more tricky, and that is actually the gray circle. And we're going to want to like separate that out, and you can use a marker, kind of draw a line that actually stops the circle from touching the fleur-de-lis itself, the different arms of it. And so you're going to cut that out, separating it. It's strongest when it's separated. Again, hold down the stencil as you're pulling the piece out, not to bend it in any way. And you should have something that looks like that. And you may have to go and like kind of clean the edges up. Once you've done the whole thing, you may realize that the circle is kind of egg-shaped, but you can go in there and kind of rework it by turning the image over and working from the back side. And when you're done, you should have something like this. This is a perfect size, actually, for a t-shirt. You can make a patch out of it to apply to a t-shirt, or you can apply it directly to a t-shirt. It's maybe a little bit too large to make a greeting card, but stencils can be used to make greeting cards. They can be used to make art pieces. We have this piece. You may recognize the Mardi Gras beads of it all. But this is about Australia's very first gay Mardi Gras, which was a riot. Being the month of Pride, I think it's a little important to kind of point out some of the queer history that we have. And so Australia wanted to have a gay pride parade. They ended up calling it Mardi Gras. They really loved the carnivalness and kind of festivities that happened with Mardi Gras. So in 1978, they started down 4 blocks. By the time they got to the 3rd block, there was a group of police officers that stopped them. They stopped them with police brutality. They actually beat them. And so this is actually supposed to represent that time in place in history, the riot of Mardi Gras in Australia's gay history. So you can make different art pieces. That one has a lot of different layers. And I'm going to show you a very simple and easy way to turn this into a few different layers. So we're going to spray it. You're going to want to take a piece of paper, a piece of wood, cloth, t-shirt, and then put that down. If you're going to use a t-shirt, you're going to want to put a piece of cardboard between the 2 layers. That allows so when you spray it, it doesn't show up on the back of the shirt and only the front of the shirt. So I asked that you get some spray paint. There's a couple different kinds of spray paint. Rust-Oleum is a very affordable kind. I like Montana spray paints. They actually come with a very large selection of colors. You can make something truly artistic using a different color palette in this way. Rust-Oleum has a good color chart, but not as many colors as Montana does. Krylon is just a runny spray paint. It has a lot of filler or acetone in it, some clear sealants, and whenever you spray it, it always kind of looks translucent, like you're staring at a piece of plexiglass. So I wouldn't recommend using Krylon. If you do use Rust-Oleum, you're not going to be able to get a pure black. It's good for all the other colors, but whenever you spray black, it's going to be slightly gray. Montanas make paint that has a lot more opacity in them. For that matter, I think that the black is more pure. Now there's a number of different caps that you can use. They all come in different colors. This one is like a fat cap, does like very large areas. These ones do kind of like more fine lines. And you can experiment with them. But for stencil making, I really think a standard cap is good. And you know, if you use a fat cap, you end up with spray paint all over your stencil. And I know this sounds very redundant, but we don't want spray paint on the stencil. We want spray paint to go through the holes onto the paper and not be everywhere. So if you use a fat cap and you just go like this, you're going to have all sorts of paint on the stencil itself. And when you lift it up, it can drip down onto your clean area, and you don't want that. So you're going to put it down, the areas you want, make sure that it's spaced well. You may want to use some tape down the edges so it doesn't move to your piece of cardboard or whatever, maybe just like one side, you don't need both sides. And I like to think of myself as a printer. And a printer, when it does its thing, it goes one direction, stops, comes back, goes in one direction. So you're going to want to kind of think about this technique when you're spraying. Really try to do your lines close to one another. If you just go like this, you end up with all this extra paint everywhere, and you don't want that. And so when you first get these cans, we're going to want to shake them. It's really good to shake it upside down. It allows for the beads to kind of fall down and mix more. When it's sitting on the shelf, everything definitely falls to the bottom. So turning it upside down is a really good way. You really want that combustion to be in there. When you first get it, you know, your cap's not going to go down. And the reason why it's not going to go down is because there's this little washer. So you have to remove the washer and then put the cap down. So make sure you're like kind of in a very, very well ventilated area. You may actually want to put on a spray paint mask. I'm already wearing one mask. I don't want to use two so you can hear me, but I would definitely recommend having a little bit better mask on. So again, I'm just spraying in one direction, stopping, going back to where I started. And spraying. Remove your one piece of tape. Be careful not to move the stencil. Put your hand down on one side. Lift up the other side, like so. Allowing not to smudge the stencil. If you kind of move it in a different direction, your image will be altered and not very legible. So you should have something that looks a little bit like this. And this is like a very, very cool, good way. But there's a few different things you can do to kind of make this a double layer. One is like, let this dry. Set the stencil back down, slightly off-centered from where it is. Respray it in a second color, not the same color that you used. Lift it, hold your hand down, lift it up so that you don't smudge it at all. And you can have a bit of a drop shadow. So at first I sprayed black here. And then the second time I sprayed blue, but I like lifted it up and like I moved it to the side so it's not the same registration, allowing for a double layer image to happen. Now there's one other way that we can make a double layered stencil. And that is by cutting the letter O out. So when you want to make a second layer from a pre-existing layer so that they register up, it's really important that you work with the stencil itself. You don't want to go all the way back to the original image. The image may not line up properly. You really want to like spray it down and then work with this for the second layer. And so what you're going to do is you're going to actually cut out the letter O. And so we cut it out. And we have that circle. So we're going to spray the circle area. Like so. Let that dry. Put the second layer on there. Spray it. And you should have something that looks similar to this. So these are two simple ways of making a double layer out of a very simple one layer. And so I hope that you all have enjoyed this stencil workshop. I hope that maybe you can make something and give it to your neighbor as like a little hug, although we're not able to actually do it there in real life. I think getting gifts are a really good idea and a good thing to do. So maybe spray it onto a t-shirt, who knows, maybe make it a sign, put it in your house, in your window, so other people can see that New Orleans is a very strong city and that you're all together, although you're slightly social distancing and separated, like a stencil. And you can use these tools for other things. Right now we have a lot of protests going on. Black Lives Matter is a very important thing, and some other protests going on around the world on very important issues. So maybe you can use this technique to actually make a protest sign or an other kind of very social justice important tool. And being that these are very simple to find items, it can be very, very, very inexpensive. One thing that I think about is that in Argentina during the Dirty War, there's a group of stencil artists that would go into dumpsters at the hospital dumpsters, and they would actually take X-ray files out to make protests against the government and their inequality of an actual government to the people of the citizens of Argentina. And so they actually use these very inexpensive materials to make something that's very important and powerful and impactful for their city. So again, I hope that you enjoyed this and that you have some time to make some art from beyond this point. Thank you.